everybody's kind of
Ripping. Ripping, yeah.
Yeah.
I ripped the old ones.
ready. Ready? Okay. We are going to start tonight. So meeting is in session. And on the agenda tonight, we have a few new things looking forward to talking about. Before we start, I just want to say Happy New Year to everybody, if I haven't seen you already. Also, I wanted to give a quick update on the January 6th meeting that we had with District 18 at the Public Forum. It was really well attended. It was great. I think we had like 25 people there. Phil was there, Hans was there, Jerry Lee was there, town staff was great. A few things they talked about. Oh, it was also videotaped, and in case people are wondering about that, we did videotape it. I think it's loaded already on the website. Okay. We talked about the 5G small cell tower. We talked about education reforms across the state, and that would include increased resources for pre-K, a new IG, an IG office, special needs. There was also discussion about the pedestrian safety in the area and what's being done, the Strathmore sidewalk that we know about, and budget, which we've been assured for 2021 is looking pretty good. And in fact, the state said they may even help with some of with the county, Montgomery County, since we got the biggest hit, for the wind reimbursement. And I don't know exactly what that means by giving us some assistance, giving the county some assistance, but if it's a way to relieve some of the bearing on the local municipalities, that would be nice.
I want to see the check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about that, and we can move into the approval of the agenda. There was a new one revised very shortly,
Yeah,
so
does everybody have one? I just realized that I didn't put one in everybody's file.
First one change
I think
that.
Okay.
Yep.
everybody's got one, a new one? Okay. So is there any changes to the agenda?
Not for me.
Maybe a very small one for me. I'm wondering if we could add on something, talking about the packet. I'm wondering if we need it anymore, so. I'll just
Okay,
talk about it briefly.
where are you now?
We could put it as a, I don't know where we'd put it. It's not, we don't really have a discussion item.
I'm sure, sorry, what's it about though? I don't-
I'm just wondering if we, in 2020, if we need to get a packet physically delivered to our houses anymore. Like, I don't think I do. I would be fine with just getting digital, so I was curious if everybody else thought similar, so.
Okay,
I don't
so
know where
that's
we
not
put
really
that.
unless you want to just put it down as new business?
It could just be a new business thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think if we do that,
physical packets.
I don't know how much impact it has across everybody else.
Hard
but-
copy, maybe?
Okay,
Yeah,
let's
hard copy
put
packet.
that down, Stephen, and then we can have a little discussion about that. How's that?
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a digital-only copies of town council documents versus hard copy packets delivered. Okay, something like that. And Stephen, you'll take that, okay?
Sure.
All right, thanks. Anybody else have any changes? Okay. If everybody approves?
Yes.
Okay, it's approved unanimously with that change. And now on to minutes, December 9th, 2019, regular meeting. Do we have any changes to the minutes? I
Yes.
think you all had a chance to look at them. Okay, Stephen?
I do, and I wonder if it's realistic to try to cover it all here. I mean, it was, some of the stuff was way off. And I wonder, in general, if we're trying to like do too much with the minutes, trying to capture too much, because it was like 3 pages, probably could have been less, but like the area about the part that I talked about, there were a lot of things that came across that the way it's stated is not true. So I may have not explained it totally clearly, but I think it just got one step further away. And when I went to minutes, so I don't know, I could send a markup of it to you, or we could try to tackle it all now. I'm just wondering if it's going to take too long.
Why don't you draft something, and then send it to us, and
Yeah,
then we can,
yeah, assuming we're all
In this
good with
one
that.
in particular, I'm trying to get closer to what was done, not what was said. But this one in particular, I had a tough time with finding that balance and getting some of those specifics that might want to be referenced later. So
Yeah,
I think that
I
would
hear
be
ya.
really helpful actually to see.
I think I didn't explain it extremely linear, and it just kind of bounced around on a lot of different topics.
Yep.
So and the write-up of it
Okay.
kind of did the same.
So
So-
are you going to send us a marked up copy? Or if you want to
Draft
keep it
paragraph.
really, really brief, and then send just like an addendum of this is what you were trying to say, and we can either attach it as minutes to the minutes or just as part of a document read?
Why wouldn't you just change the minutes and have 1 minute?
Because I'm not sure whether or not, I mean, we certainly want to give a full explanation. And while the minutes, we try not to get too detailed, I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt that you might want to keep the minutes here really brief, but refer to, an addendum or something, which can go, because the town is going to be very interested, the residents. are
Yeah,
very-
I think there's a different way to achieve that with
Okay.
what I'm going to talk about tonight, and putting together a study on it. It explains some more of this in detail. But I think that could be maybe half or 2/3 as much, and maybe just stick to the relevant fact pattern, and we can refer to something that's later. I mean, I had it marked up, but I just feel like it's going to take us 20 minutes to go
Okay, great.
through it.
So
That was the
we-
thought.
Let's see, Stephen, this is, would this be more specifically there's 2 bullets in here. One, are they all the ADUs? Or one is the corner?
It's all
Yeah, I'm
related
trying to
to
pull
the,
it back up.
it's all related to the land use task force.
Okay.
deliberation.
Yeah, it's mostly that one about the land use task force.
Bullets, are they all related to the accessory dwelling units? Or is one a little bit differently? I just
the-
crossed a line through all of it, so I'm going to
Yeah.
erase that
I'd say
line. if I'm
probably the
wrong.
whole land use and historic preservation
really
section,
that
I
one.
guess, because
And
it's
I
sort of
would-
interwoven.
I
Okay.
would separate the question of rewriting the corner lot concerns from the ADUs.
Yeah.
And I
just
think,
put it as
they
two
have to
different
be
bullets.
2 separate issues. I think we should do one, if we're going to do the one, we should do it, and it has to have town input.
Mhm.
Not considering ADUs, and then say, what happens when ADUs are superimposed or not, if they can
Yeah.
fit. And if they can't fit, too bad. If they fit, fine.
And they were
And it's going to vary
never,
lot by lot anyway.
they were never meant to be coupled anyway. They just happened to overlap a little bit. So, yeah, so it'd mostly be a suggested rewrite of that, which I can send to all of us for consideration. And then,
So
and
this will require a rewrite, I'm just making the changes for the, before we approve the minutes.
Yeah.
Anything else?
actually, I thought the markup didn't go through it. Oh, looks like maybe part of it did. There was another one in there about, I'm trying to remember what it was. My markups show on my computer, they don't show on here, so that's why I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was about the house on Kenilworth. Like the way it reads, it may alarm some residents thinking that it's inevitable to be torn down, but we don't really know that. I wonder if we could
I flagged that
soften
one as
that,
well.
yeah, soften that language so it,
Okay.
Is this in the
yeah,
town
which-
manager's
It's at the
report?
very end, yeah.
Okay. Once the town is in, it will go to, then it will go on the market. Okay, so we'll just say then it will go on the market? What would you like to say?
well, it could potentially be, they could come to that decision where they're going to tear it down, but,
Right.
I mean, you could say potentially be torn down. I think maybe
You
it
don't
was
even have to
less.
say that, because it's
Yeah.
going to be up to whoever
Yeah.
would want to buy
You
it.
just
Well,
terminate.
I think either the bank has an option to tear it down, I think is.
Yeah,
But
They
it's
just-
still
Or
going to
it
be
would go
up
on
to
the
them.
market. And then
right?
when it goes on the market, that person
Oh.
would then have another decision on if they want to
Yeah.
do something or if they want to tear it down.
Right.
now
I
remember.
think it is good to have the potential in there, because I think it is good to get that word out in case there's anyone who wants
It's
to
real.
take any action that might
really
mitigate that.
Mhm.
The other thing I thought about that is that it says it's not an historic contributing property, nor is it in the historic district, but it would be good, I think, if we mention that though it is a Victorian-era building.
Nice.
And it is not true that it's technically not a contributing property. It's just that outside the county historic master plan, there is no such documentation on contributing or not. It's really just a part of their master plan. The whole town is a historic district outside of that county plan. So it just may be like misleading.
How would
So-
you change it?
Jerry Lee, what did you say?
I asked that the
Though
sentence
it-
begin with, though it is a Victorian-era building, it is not, but then Steve
It's
wants
not,
to
yeah.
amend the rest.
I think I had something written that it's not in the county historic master plan district, nor is it individually listed, which are the two big things of, it's more historic than a lot of places that are in that county historic master
Or
plan
we could-
district, but it's just not in it.
Or
So-
we
Nor
could
is
just
it in the
specific-
county
no, no,
historic? How do you-
Perhaps, I have
Go
a
ahead.
suggestion to make, streamline that.
Yeah.
Why don't we just say it's not protected?
Exactly, yeah.
As a historic property, it's not,
It's not protected in that
It's not
county
a-
master plan.
yeah,
So though it is a Victorian era house, you want to say?
It is not.
It is not.
protected by the county master plan.
Yes. It's
It
just,
is
yeah,
not protected under
the county historic master plan.
county historic master plan.
It is literally a historic home, it's just not in that
Right.
historic master plan,
Right.
so.
Right, okay. Any other changes? We also have the potential, right? We have, sorry.
Yeah, add
that
the potential up above.
It'll go on the
under-
market or potentially be torn down, something like that?
And be potentially,
And/or, okay.
and/or, right.
We good? Anybody else?
Excuse me. Mayor's opening remarks, the last sentence, since we're talking about this house, it says the county cut the grass and boarded the windows of the house. Did the county actually board up the windows, or was it the new,
County's contractor, I guess technically, but the county.
The county
oh,
did.
the county?
Very-
did. I thought that the other people,
Very top windows where the vultures got in and out and
Yeah.
hung out, they got closed.
Yeah, ground
Oh, yeah,
level.
down at the ground level underneath where the porch, underneath the porch.
okay, I thought that the new
seen-
owners, the people who,
No, yeah.
Okay.
Although they've been in contact with the county about the violations, and if there's violations, they, the bank, need to now take care of. So, that's,
okay.
So Dan Simons didn't cut that grass
The next round.
with some expletive in
He's
it?
gonna build a snowman in front of
Okay,
it.
yeah.
So is that okay, Phil, you all right then with the language?
Yeah.
Okay. No other change?
Well, it's a very small one, just a suggestion. Under the new business, where it's essentially the second from the last sentence, where it says the designs will be completed by summer of 2020. I think designs from SHA or by SHA, so we know who's responsible for generating those as opposed to
Okay.
assuming that maybe we are implicated in that.
All right, good.
And then on the top of the next page,
Designs by
which is
SHA. Okay.
SRTS, I guess it's part of the first sentence. Second line, the document, let me pick it up in the middle of the first line. Documents and the checklists that include materials lists furnished by the subcontractors, tracked down by unit cost. What does that mean? And why do we care what the unit cost is?
It's on the first sentence.
Do we want to get that, is that finer detail? I mean,
I'm reading it,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. Maybe what needs to be there is just which or that which will be tracked down to
Oh.
the unit cost, or that will be tracked down to the unit
Okay.
cost.
Okay.
And that's why they're
It
important to
made-
have.
It made no sense to me as it reads.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
we'll say that will be, because it goes together.
A question back on the one before that, the one about designs will be completed by summer 2020. Is that something, did I miss it in the last meeting? Did they commit that they are going to definitely do the design, but not necessarily the funding? Okay.
No,
Or both.
Just wanted to make sure that's
Well,
actually correct.
They'll do both, and really, we're not implicated either in this, in the spend or in the design.
Okay.
They're treating us as a courteous,
Okay.
with courtesy as a partner,
Okay.
not a business partner, but as a
Okay.
neighbor partner.
Okay.
This is one of those recognitions, I think, where, at least even within the public forum with D18, District 18, where the state and the county are trying to address the pedestrian safety issues, which is why now sidewalk along the rest of Strathmore has become a real important activity for them, which is good.
Mayor Kaki, just a question about minutes in general. Now that we have a full audio and video, like, recording, I'm just curious what purpose, sort of in this day and age, the minutes serve. I could understand them maybe as a, in essence, a table of contents, so that if someone were to utilize the full recording, that you could find things or the topics, but it seems to me sort of an exercise in futility. I understand historically why people took minutes, but in this day and age, I'm just curious if maybe we would want to contemporize ourselves a little bit.
Do you want to address that, or I can?
Sure, you can have, yeah.
Sure.
I can jump in, yeah.
Well, I'm
We
going
address
to...
it to you, so I'll go now. I'll say what I have to say after you.
I'm happy to readdress it to Andrea if the protocol
Right,
requires.
and Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not just about the paper or generally speaking about a historical document. It's also in compliance with state records, and I believe we have to have some form of hard copy minute, whether it's really brief or not, because this is part of records management.
Sure, yeah.
Compliance with doing, having us as a local municipality.
Which I would say that you could meet that compliance with a far shorter document.
Yes, you
Yes.
could, yeah.
Action minutes.
Yeah.
You could, but I would go back to what you had said in the beginning, which was, I think it makes a good overview of what, if somebody's looking for something specific and doesn't know where to look for, if they could look at the minutes, they may get a better idea as to whether that's the tape they're.
Yeah, totally. I think as a table of contents, essentially, it could be really helpful. Who wants to sit through an hour YouTube video to know if you can find it? But I think that you could be compliant and we might save 20 minutes a meeting. It's just a
Some-
thought. I'm not disputing the importance of documentation. I just think we have a far better documentation, which is this and that, than the, interpretation of what's said.
And some towns do action minutes, so it would be just the actions that were taken, basically. The discussion wouldn't be in there, so it would be, the amendments were, the agenda was approved, this ordinance was approved, this, and they're like one page. Some of the other towns are on here.
I like the idea of the action. Yeah, I think the action minutes make sense. We want to make sure the decisions are documented, but the town also has the Bugle reporter who sends out a summary faster than we're able to produce the minutes, so people are able to find a written summary pretty early.
I don't know if that is the document of record for...
Oh, I'm not suggesting it is. I'm just suggesting it's a summary that's available, and as long as our decisions are well documented, and again, we have the
That's the
video
official.
recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have another thought that will maybe complement this, but I'm just putting it out there. We've seen agendas from other municipalities where they have time slots, and we've not done that, because there's so much variation. But I wonder if, at least in the summation of minutes, there's a way to take what we've recorded, right, you and Elizabeth, and write down the time sort of stamp on each one. That way, when residents see that, they can then, hopefully that jives with what Grant is doing.
That sort of thing I think is really helpful
Yeah.
for folks
And
trying to,
then-
who want to get to what was
Yeah.
said or find a
Yeah,
topic.
They can go out to the video and then look for that timestamp and go there.
It would be helpful to me, like, if such a thing didn't exist in reverse, like, when I go to research something on a land use topic, be able to know, well, 2004 in March, it was discussed, and November it was discussed, and be able to go back and not have to look through everything and kind of see. So I think it's kind of what, Dan, I think you're suggesting is maybe a table of context, even if we just discuss things, so we discussed park benches, we discussed the sky falling and whatever else, and then you could refer back, plus have the action things that would meet the records requirement of saying that this ordinance was passed and et cetera.
Yeah.
Seems good to me.
Example help. That way residents don't have to sit through a whole video to scan through it. They can get right to it.
It's possible to lock anything that happens back to the video either by the final recording of the channel, because I've got it time stamped in the corner, or I can peel off an audio file with that same thing if someone just wants to work with audio instead of video plus audio.
Thank you. Did that get recorded?
It did.
Okay.
I'm standing next to one of the microphones.
Great. Okay, without further ado, unless there are still more changes to the minutes, would you like to approve the minutes with the changes that have been discussed?
And my ones that I'll send by email.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see you approving something that we haven't seen. I
Exactly.
mean,
Okay.
if we rewrite it, or a portion of it, then we can approve it next meeting.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right, we will not approve these tonight. Okay. On to presentations by residents. Do we have any presentations by residents? Dan, could you, thanks.
Most important role.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Leeprick. I live on Strathmore. And I don't have a presentation, but I just have a couple statements I wanted to make after reading the Bugle. So since I live right near the corner of Strathmore and Keswick, I just wanted to add to the comments about safety. It's just extremely unsafe. I cross Strathmore every day. My 3 kids cross it almost every day, and it's extraordinary how rude the drivers are at not stopping for the blinking light, sometimes for the whole extent of the blinking light. And I'm just also curious if we can get a camera put in. It's just a question, I don't know, for speeding and for going through a pedestrian blinking light when there's a pedestrian there, because I read that they are making cameras for that purpose with $1,000 fines. The second item I wanted to ask about is how to kind of petition the city council to look at citywide curbside composting, not just as an option, but as an offering from the city. Perhaps a possibility would be replacing the Thursday trash collection with compost collection.
Are you referring to the town or?
The town.
Some other city? Okay.
Garrett Park, the town.
Okay, so you're looking for,
Town of Garrett Park compost collection, perhaps on Thursday as an alternative to trash collection on Thursday, or as an addition to the Monday, Thursday trash. Compost,
so Jennifer, let me ask you, since I know there are residents who are already on some compost
Yep.
schedule, they have?
I am, yep.
But they get a return, I think?
We do.
Right? They put their compost out, but then they get the,
Soil back.
yes.
Yeah.
So you'd be looking that the town would somehow get that back as well, and it would Okay, that'll be yeah.
Sure, they could, the town could get it back. A number of towns are already doing it, so Tacoma Park, Chevy Chase, Somerset, they all offer it for all their residents, a weekly compost collection. Environmentally, it's where Montgomery County is going. They will mandate it, but they just don't have enough composting facilities in the county to handle the amount of compost that will be created. But our town is small enough that it's easily handled by one of the many private companies that compost currently.
Okay, and when they return the
Soil?
composted soil,
Yeah,
does that go to each individual household, or is it a?
It does
a
currently.
pile somewhere?
Yep, anybody who is signed up for composting, they have the option of getting a bag of soil. I think it's twice a year that we get. It's not a lot of soil. Yeah, it's surprisingly not a lot. But it is perfectly great soil that goes into my vegetable garden. So.
We do it ourselves. We get a lot of great soil.
Yeah, so ideally, people can compost in their backyards for free, but the fact is that brings rodents, and so if you're composting everything, all your food waste, which we do, then having a private company compost will eliminate the chance of, rodents or animals going at the compost. And
Ours is in a tumbler, so no,
Yeah.
it can't be penetrated by raccoons and rats.
yeah,
But okay,
so I would add also that it's food waste comprises 25 to 40% of garbage, so that includes food waste that's going down your garbage disposal in your sink. So if any food waste that's going into the garbage or the garbage disposal is being incinerated right now or going into a landfill, and that if we are composting instead, we're saving 25 to 40% of the waste and making it into soil, which also is better for the earth and erosion.
that's a great idea. I think it was brought up
Yeah, we
on
talked,
Monday, January
Yeah.
6th, right, with the public forum.
Yep.
At the county level.
By the
Yeah.
way, you can
Well-
compost all non-recyclable paper, too.
Correct, yep, and pizza boxes and,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
compostable paper products, cups, silverware, yep.
Does the current service that you use provide you with a container?
They do.
And if so, what size is it?
Yep, it's, who I use is Compost Crew, which is the one that we have a discount through for Garrett Park residents.
Right.
And you have a choice in the size of container. So they provide either a 5-gallon bucket,
Right.
or I have the taller, it's on wheels, and
Right.
it's, it locks also for pesky raccoons.
But you can.
They can open it, though.
Not mine.
Our
You must
raccoon
have
has figured it
smart
out.
The tall one?
Yes.
They're amazing.
Yeah, but he's a smart, or she is brilliant. We have to keep it in the garage now.
Yeah, that's what we do too.
Yeah.
Keep it in the ground, yeah.
what does that cost approximately?
It's a good question. I think it's $20 a month for the 5-gallon, and then also when you sign up, you get 1 month per year for free. So about $100, or what is it? Yeah,
And you said that they're
110.
already offering some kind of discounted,
they are. So Garrett Park gets a discount because many years back, someone here arranged that, and that is,
climate
if you sign up today without the discount, it's $34 a month, and we're getting it for $20 a month per household.
Oh, right, okay.
okay, but maybe we can negotiate even further. If
We can.
have people-
Yep, I actually called them, the company, and we can get a further town discount. And there's also the option, I don't have any idea if there's probably not land available for actual composting, but that's another option, talking about that. They will provide a discount. Also, I know that we have our own trash collectors on Thursday, so if we replaced that with trash, the Compost Crew said they would give us an even further discount if our own trash collectors collected it. I'm not trying to put those guys out of work, so if they wanted to collect it and deliver it to their composting facility. Yeah.
That's great. Is this, if council members remind me, is this something that the Conservation Action Network takes on?
I have talked to them about it.
What?
I have talked to them about it.
So where I'm going with the question, do you all remember who's got the, who has that as a delegated authority? Is it?
It's not an official committee of the town, right? It's
Doesn't have to be. It's just
I'm just
there.
wondering.
Yeah.
No, but there
Okay.
needs to be a liaison.
There is a.
Is there-
I was
liaison.
for a while, I don't think I am anymore. This goes back about 5 years.
Well,
maybe
I'm
10.
thinking of what happened even a couple
I
of
think
years
Jane
ago, a
was,
year ago.
yeah.
What?
I think Jane was.
I think so.
Mention
You
it
think
to
Jane
me.
was?
Yeah.
Okay.
She didn't mention
Which
it to
would
me, but
be-
I'm willing to follow up.
Oh, actually, yeah. Okay, we'll
Pays
look
well.
into this, Jennifer. Thank you very much.
Well, can I, since you asked the question about the status of the crossing at Keswick, should I just go ahead and address that now?
Can we wait till we get to?
I don't, well, if she wants to go home, because she said her piece.
But thank you for also just bringing it up.
What's your phone number so I can keep you posted? I'm sorry?
206
Okay,
954 0059.
okay.
I think Jennifer's comment on, swapping out Thursday is really interesting, right? Especially when you think like, it doesn't put someone out of work, it just sort of like repurposes that productivity for another thing. I think it's really interesting. So maybe it's as easy as at least starting with getting a proposal from the compost
network.
crew and just, see what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing a little survey of, who would actually participate.
Or how many they need to participate in order to be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Can they do it on 20 households, or do they need 100?
Yeah, I mean, we know they do it now on as few as are willing to pay the $20 a month or
yeah.
whatever. So, I mean, I see a fair amount of the green bins out.
You could do it, if you do it as a town service, basically it wouldn't matter to some extent how many participated, because we would end up paying for the whole town in a manner of speaking. Although it would also encourage more people to
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah, which would be great.
because they wouldn't have to pay for it.
Well, it's interesting, I don't know how this would work, but food waste is very heavy. And so it costs the haulers more if they're paying per whatever,
For the
right?
tipping charge.
So
For hauling water.
in theory, if that's getting now diverted and they're not having to pay for that, then that saving should be passed on to us as well to offset the cost
Sure.
of the composting crew,
Makes
in
sense.
theory.
In theory.
Well, I'll volunteer to follow up with the Conservation Action Network and compost
pick it
crew,
up and haul it to the-
see what we can find out.
Okay, Jerry Lee just volunteered to follow up and work with Andrea on this and the Conservation Action Network.
And, even if it were town service and the town covered the cost and budgeted that, you could, I don't know if anybody would do it, I mean, I would, but it could also be like voluntary to pay for, meaning even if you paid into the town. So for example, like I currently pay for it. If I'm a believer in it, I'd be willing to send my $20 a month to the town instead of that. And again, just voluntary, but that might be some offset. You may get some people who are passionate about the topic who would say, yeah, if this helped the town afford doing it free for everybody, I'd be willing to pay. Because I would say I'm aligned with Jennifer that like it's, a lot of folks or some folks are trying to create a movement and they're not necessarily looking for it to be free, but understand making it free for the whole town gets so much higher participation, so.
Okay, maybe you can work with Jerry Lee, or just when we get to that point,
Okay.
and with
Good.
Andrea.
Yeah.
We'll have to figure some kind of method for the budgeting. All right, thank you. Then moving on to the action item, introduction of FY '20 mid-year budget adjustment ordinance, and I'm going to defer to Andrea.
Sure. Okay, so in terms of big picture, with this budget adjustment, the revenues would be estimated to increase by just shy of 265,000, and the majority of that is the FY19 end-of-year carryover. And that additional revenue would be used in 3 different places in the operating budget, capital fund, and the reserve fund. And the operating budget, just over 92,000 of that would be for various operating expenses. Just over 16,000 of that would be added to the operations contingency for a total of over 62,000 in that contingency line item. On the capital side of things, over 43,000 would be for specific capital expenses, and then 36,000, a little more than that, would be added to the capital contingency. And then the reserve fund would be over 75,000, and that's the employee leave reserve, and that accounts for having 5 full-time staff and then my severance per my employment agreement. And then I don't know if we want to go through each page to see if there's specific questions that you have based on the changes, but that's just sort of the high-level summary
Can
anyway.
you give like a 30-second explanation of each page, or?
Could I direct everybody to look, thank you, Andrea, to look at the budget tables, and also there is the notes section. So as Andrea was just going down her numbers, you can see where she was just talking about, if you were following. So I just wanted to say that, but now I defer back to Andrea and Stephen's question to go through
Mhm.
things.
Sure. Do you want me to just go through each?
I mean, just a super high-level summary of
For
kind of
each line?
what's
Okay.
intended on each
Sure.
page.
Okay, so for revenue, the line 1 is the carryover, so that reflects the change in carryover based on FY19 end-of-year actuals. Line 2.3 was renamed to other local taxes and fees to prepare us for the receipt of revenue related to parking citations. Town hall rents was adjusted based on if the renovations are not done in FY20, and then looking at the average over the last 4 fiscal years.
What line are you on?
5.2.1,
Okay, okay.
and that's the changes for revenues. For operations, 11.2.1 accounts for, there's a $6,000 added there for replacing our town signs since they are falling apart, and then also to get the town sign that was on Town Hall previously, to get one created that, so that Town Hall's identified. For 11.2.2, this is additional $25,000 for support services contract for professional services. So this would be, for example, somebody to help with analysis related to the FY21 budget. There's changes that need to be made to get our code so that it's up to date. And then some of the town communications things that we've discussed. So making sure that we don't have various databases and email lists, but having one, one place, one consolidated place for that information. 11.2.3 is the cost of a parking enforcement officer, so that's $31,200, and that's estimated based on what some of the other nearby towns are paying. 11.3, I added in $821 because I hadn't budgeted for me to go to the fall MML conference that I went to. 11.5, the addition of $154 is to reflect the actuals for that line item for this fiscal year. 11.7 adds in a little over $20,000, $20,679, and that both reflect some of the actual costs that we've already paid to date based on some of the ongoing costs related to having a server, improving our security, having backups, Office 365 subscriptions, some of the costs that we foresee having related to a help desk, related to sort of future operational miscellaneous expenses. So our hardware costs are charged in the capital line item, but there are other things that come up that need to be fixed, so making sure that we have some cushion there to deal with those when they come up. 13.2, town hall line item, adding $5,501 to that. That is looking at the quote that was given to us for the AV improvements, but adding in some additional funds based on the quote, and then adding a projector and mount as well to that. 14.1 is renamed to road maintenance and cleaning, and then added $2,000 there for snow removal labor, because one of our maintenance staff will be out for the next probably 6 weeks. If it snows, we'll have some contract labor supporting us. And then we had some repairs to the plow, and so accounting for those actuals that have been done. And that one was running a little hot in November, so wanted to make sure that there was enough funding in that line item. 14.2, this is based on what our actuals will be at the end of FY20, because we had a June 29th, 2019 invoice that was paid in this fiscal year rather than the last fiscal year, so we think that we'll be off by that amount. 17, that's highlighted just because that contingency changed. And then looking below, line 20 transfers 80,000 to the capital account. And then line 21.1 is that transfer to the operating reserves for the employee leave reserve.
I appreciate you going through it, and feel free to go even
Okay.
faster if you like.
Okay. Well, this one should go a little faster because there's fewer items at least. 26.3.1 and 26.3.2, it's a little confusing when you look at it, but if you look at the proposed change column, this is only adding $8,000, but it's moving some of the money between the categories so that it's more realistic for what we expect to get for the bills there. So we expect the SRTS inspector cost to be $40,000. We expect that having an SRTS contingency of $8,000 is what we'll need. For storm drains, 28.2, that's based on the estimates, the estimate based on what the task force came up with for proposed solutions and what we think some of those proposed solutions will cost, and then adding in a little bit of extra given the type of project, the nature of the project. 30.2, just some additional funds in here to account for some of the hardware costs that we've already had, and then also some of the hardware costs that we anticipate for the archives. We didn't realize that that computer was in pretty bad shape. And then 32.2, removing some funds from there, again, based on the proposed recommendations, I guess, from the Stormwater Task Force. And then the contingency changed, and that's why that's highlighted.
Can you, 28.2, it said may include Garrett Park
Yeah.
Nursery School,
Yep.
but then down here I see on 32.2, it looks like we did include it. I'm confused.
There's some additional, so for 32.2, both 28.2 and 32.2 have some additional funding in there in case there are other stormwater projects or stormwater planning that's needed. So that wording could be, I mean, I guess in theory, all these are may, right? But for the nursery school in particular, that one was sort of we were finding out information as this was going to press, so to speak. So those when I talked with the maintenance staff, they advised that the drains at the elementary school parking lot weren't always cleared and cleaned the way that they should be, that the elementary school or the school system staff wasn't doing that. And so they asked me to reach out to the principal and ask them to clear out those drains, right? So as a first step, we thought it would make sense to see how the drainage functions in that parking lot when those drains are working correctly. And the principal actually sent an email today with pictures of some staff that were, had taken the grate off and were in it shoveling stuff out of it, right? So that's why this is May, because we don't know if that will be sufficient enough to fix the problem. And if it's not, then there is some, there's some funding in there. But I don't think it's as concrete or not at the same place with that project that we are, for example, with the Rokeby project or the Claremont project, where those are further down and we know what we're dealing with.
I think for clarity, we should note those locations as the community center, because this is the exterior property, which is used, for the park, it's for the whole community. Lots of people use the parking lot. It's not just the nursery school. So anyway, I think it's better to list that as the community center property.
Is it on the grounds of the nursery school?
The nursery school operates inside the community center, and the grounds are part of the community center. So the nursery school operates a function inside the community center building and property. But lots of residents and neighbors use the community center playground and exterior, as well as the parking lot. People who go to the elementary school use the parking lot as well as people who use the nursery school. So to me, it's just more clear
Yeah.
what property we're referring to. Are you finished
So-
with the overview, or did we interrupt you?
Yeah, no,
I can't remember
So
now.
we've got, I guess I'm
I am,
still
yeah.
a little confused because we've got it as one service, so one services, basically for the services to have somebody look at.
Think
This
of
is
it this
basically
way.
the engineering portion.
Yeah, the Clark Azar work order bills for the planning related to the stormwater are charged to 32.2,
Okay,
but then the actual costs to do the stormwater work would be charged to 28.2.
so 20.2 service.
Hard cost and soft cost.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
But the additional amount is for all of those locations, based on the task force's
Right.
recommendations.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then I guess the last one would be the reserve fund on the back page. And I think that's pretty straightforward, and I have those calculations if anybody wants to see it. But the 75,828 going to the employee leave reserve, like I said, for accounting for 5 full-time staff, and then my severance.
Which we hope not to use.
And this is a requirement under auditing rules to have lead reserve on the books.
Well, yeah, and actually, I would like to look at it at some point, because I thought we had put quite a bit into that at one point, although I'm sure we've been drawing it down, but at one point, I thought we had quite a bit into that employee, the
Yeah, I
employee
think-
side, not your severance, but the employees side.
Right, and the difference, I think, is that we also added another full-time staff member. So it had to be, both of those had to be added to this.
So we have 5 staff, and we've never had a severance before either, so that's there. And actually, yeah, it is supposed to be sort of real time. You know,
It's like 40,000.
whatever the lead is for the current fiscal year is where you're covering it.
So I have a separate question on 26.3. Is that $8,000 increase part of the $40,000 that we approved back in November or December, whichever that was? That increase for SRTS?
So this was part of this is part of the 40,000 that we had previously, with 8,000 added to it.
So
Right, so 48,000 is the total. So if you look at 26.3, this line would now have 48,000 instead of 40,000 in it.
And the 40,000 was
This
a previous commitment
back in
that we'd
April.
made, or back in April, and we were just adjusting the budget when we approved the 40,000. But where does the 8,000 increase come from?
The 8,000 is, there was an $8,000 Clark Azar work order for construction administration services. So this is, right now, basically, if we need Clark Azar to help us with something related to SRTS, it would get charged against that work order.
It also, so it's almost like a built-in reserve contingency where we used to have, the 18 and 22 that came to 40 because we had a 18,000 reserve. Now we have to have the 40,000 available, and that's for the inspector, but we're on a whole different schedule now. And, I don't know, and I don't think Andrea, any of us know whether or not there's going to be some adjustment to the inspector cost. So this is just sort of a hold, doesn't mean it's being spent. But
Is that ultimately reimbursable by the grant, then? that increase?
No.
No,
No,
yeah.
anything over is not going to be reimbursed.
So we
I
talked
think
about.
I think we don't know about the 8,000,
Yeah,
but
I
the 40
don't think so.
won't be, right?
Yeah, the 40.
If we tap into the 40, that
The
means
40
that
is
won't be.
town money.
Yeah, it's town money, yeah.
And I don't think even, well, I can't say for sure, like Andrea says, I mean, it depends. I kind of don't think the 8 will be. We've been told a few times now by state that they're holding firm to what they have awarded us, so we're hoping there's not.
So is it a known change order, or is it a potential change order? Or is it a not to exceed bucket for
Which one?
the $8,000?
You mean
Like some engineers will,
inspector?
yeah, some engineers will do a not to exceed budget, like they'll build bits and pieces and they
It's a
they'll
ceiling.
stop at 8, okay.
Yeah, it's a ceiling.
So it could
for
be
the work
0, it
order.
could be 8,000.
Right.
Okay.
But there would have to be a change order for the inspector if we have to put some of that money towards the 40.
Okay.
I thought that's where you were going, yeah. Let's hope not. It's a mess. Want to go over the ordinance unless you still have questions on numbers?
Appreciate going through it, Andrea. It was helpful, so.
But you want me to read it, or? I don't
Is
normally
there a
read it.
motion for the, if you've all read the introduction, the ordinance?
You want a
We
motion
can
to-
either vote on it, or you can ask Andrea to read it and then vote on it.
Oh, I don't need it read.
Okay. So if you've all seen the ordinance, would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we introduce budget adjustment.
I'll second that.
We approve the ordinance for introduction.
The
Okay.
ordinance.
It's initiated by Hans, seconded by Stephen. Okay, all in favor?
Do we,
Aye.
Wait,
do we have any debate on this now that's on the table?
pardon me?
Do we have any debate on this now that's on the table?
You certainly can debate the language.
Yes, I would like to remove the $31,000 for the parking person, because I think that's a bit much. I think paying an additional staff person. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of money for something that is much, I was gonna bring this up later on, but I mean, it's a hell of a lot of money for a very small town to pay somebody to manage a handful of parking spots, and I would think that there might be other ways of doing this, possibly including either one of the town staff or seeing if we couldn't hire somebody else, but at 20 hours, I mean, that's basically 4 hours a day to manage. We don't even have that many parking spots. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a moneymaker, but it will become a burden on the town.
Money loser.
It's a huge money loser. I mean, we'll get some money back from it, and it'll certainly help us, but I just think that it's a hell of a lot of money, and I just wonder if there isn't a different way of doing this.
Yeah, I think one of the things we should do, could easily do, is just see how it works. How
It-
much, see, see how the pattern evolves. And how many
Sure.
people are we ticketing? How much money is being generated, if any? Does it start to amount to anything, or is it more as a sort of a deterrent to not waste time at a parking place that is, not to stay over?
Right.
And then if it turns out in a year that, oh, this has potential to cover the cost, then we review the question of whether or not we hire somebody to administer it, or to enforce it.
I wondered, when the ordinance was originally passed, was there any analysis of the cost of enforcement and potential revenue offset?
We talked a lot about
Right.
possible enforcement mechanisms, but the fact is that when the idea of a person came up, we knew it was more expensive than would be justified.
Yeah, and just for example, if we, say we set tickets at $50 for Penn Place, that's 620 tickets a year. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if we're gonna get that many. I guess when I read it, I had a similar reaction to Phil, but I was thinking, well, probably just realistically, the town would never hire anybody to do it. It would just sit in the budget like other things, and never go anywhere, but I'm
What-
glad you brought it
when
up.
we
Probably should
started
address it.
When we started talking about this, Gene was willing, from the vantage point of where he was sitting, to go down there a couple times a day and just take a look at the places in front of Penn Place.
Right.
And, it would be not informal, but not very formal.
So where we go with that?
But the idea was simply that one of the town staff would take this responsibility,
That was-
quotes.
That was not ever a decision that was ever made.
No, it wasn't a decision that was, well, it was a decision
It
that
was
was made,
maybe a
but
suggestion, but I
it was a
know
decision that
Andrea
was.
and I have talked about
yeah.
that, and
It
I
was-
don't see that happening. I just don't see us being able to do that. We didn't want to have staff being involved in issuing a citation. Andrea and I have talked about it too. That's where Andrea was coming from. Something else to keep in mind, it's not just the no parking zone areas that need to be, looked at on occasion during the day. There's also parking signs that have time limits. And it's, so it's not really just that simple going out and seeing if that, car is still there. I mean, you gotta come up, this is where the traffic and parking committee was gonna try to come up with some ways to implement. Where I see this number, and this was Andrea, really looking across like 5 different municipalities on what they do, who they have on staff or who they don't have on staff but may have on contract. And so she came up, she got this analysis, and this is merely a recommendation. It certainly doesn't mean, as you all have noted, that we would actually use this person, 52 weeks in the year. I mean, it's quite possible that we need this level of effort in the first 2 or 3 months, and then maybe things kind of slow down, and you may not need the person as often. So it's again, think of this as a placeholder. That's the way I would think of it.
And for the proposed budgeted amount, for $30,000, who's the person or the type of person, and what sort of coverage does that get?
20 hours a week and a parking enforcement officer. In Friendship Heights, I think that person's job is just parking enforcement. In Kensington, it's a code enforcement officer that also does parking, so they do code and parking. And some of the other places that I looked at municipalities that we're hiring right now that were roughly in this area. And those were, I think those were all parking enforcement officers.
We did also look at what a retired policeman might cost.
Yeah, and that was $50 to $60 an hour.
In case we wanted a police car.
Maybe they could pick up compost as well.
Do everything.
That sounds like it's tough to find an example that's a similar smallness of Garrett Park.
That's the problem, and that's why the parking regulations thing could never really get off the ground, because the
Yeah.
enforcement piece is really hard.
Ongoing, we probably don't need somebody there regularly. It's probably just the chance it's the one day of, that month that they're going to come by that you could really get a ticket. Word would get around. But I don't know how you
Well,
get that price, though.
Well, we could re-estimate hours if you wanted to lower this amount. Is there a place that you would like to put that offset into another line item?
I like funding the idea. I mean, I think in this town, people just seem to park anywhere they want, leave their cars in the strangest of places. I think if we're going to have no parking signs and, what's the point of all of the no parking signs if people can just ignore them? So,
We have stuff that's not even assigned to. There's been a fair amount of cars I've seen lately on Strathmore where they park like across the driveway, or across the sidewalk, so you can't even use it. Like, no particular reason, just parked in it, so.
well, as I'll bring up later on, I mean, we can also do warnings, and I've got a few ideas of warning signs, which I would hope that anybody could actually put out, because they're not really they're not as much a legal document. I mean, although people may not like that, but I think it would definitely help.
We should, well, that's part of your task force to recommend or not. You know,
Right.
Who should have these warning signs to put out?
Well, and that's,
I don't know if every single resident should have.
no, I'm not saying that by any sense of the word. I'm saying more like it would have to be somebody who's associated with the town, like town staff or somebody.
Phil, is there a level at which you'd be comfortable funding it?
I would think I'll go with half of that, because I got to thinking about it, and I came up with basically if somebody did a tour 1 hour a day, twice a day, if it's possible, and that could mean that we work with somebody else, that we could end up with, still get what we need.
So we have 20-minute parking areas, we have 3-hour parking areas.
I mean, yeah, we're gonna have to, we're not gonna be able to get everything, but I think,
But I'm seconding, I'm not seconding them. I'm reflecting on what Dan was saying about, you know, just in the very, you know, in the beginning, you know, you may have a lot of offenders and maybe some repeat offenders, and then maybe it would die down. But why just look only a couple times a day? That's sort of beside the point of having all these parking.
Or
signs.
if, I would say, I mean, Phil, if you're comfortable at $15,000, what if we spent the $15,000 in a short duration of time and did a test, willing to, you know, we're willing to spend $15,000 to determine, wow, this isn't worth it, you know, let's not spend any more, or we spend $15,000, you know, over just a short duration of time and realize like, hey, we think it generates some revenue, more importantly than the revenue. I'd be happy to spend the money if it, on a continuous basis, got people following the rules.
So may I remind you that this would, I imagine this would be some kind of a contractual agreement or arrangement with someone, right?
Yes.
And, you know,
Yeah, so what, I mean, Andrea,
know.
if
I
you
mean,
could see
you-
what's out there, you know, like, for example, if there's if, you know, most vendors looking to sell services are willing to do a test phase or, you know, do a 60-day trial or something, and why don't we fund a shorter duration for a set amount of money, and let's see, because otherwise it's sort of anecdotal debate, and none of us can be sure of what the outcome could be.
and of course, if you don't spend it all, I mean, you know, I think leaving it there, unless you know where else you'd like to put that money, because we do a balanced budget here,
right.
so where else would you want to move that 15 to? But otherwise, leaving it, and then as we get further along, if we've done a 3-month test, for example, and we don't think we need as much, you know, that goes into your carryover, or,
Are we able to
We can
put
move it to
any,
the next budget if we needed to.
yeah.
Yeah, are we
Just
able
let
to-
15 go into another, sorry.
yeah, I was just wondering if we were able to put it towards like a capital reserve for like town hall renovation, the future town hall renovations. I mean, I would rather do that than fund full-time parking enforcement.
In the.
I mean, I don't mind doing a small test. I agree, if we're going to have the ordinance, we do have to enforce it in some way, but I also think that this does seem like a lot of money. We should try a test, and maybe the extra could go into capital reserve or
And-
something.
What about the compost? Sorry.
I was going to say, in the FY20 original budget discussion, so in line 27.2 in the budget notes, council did talk about this, and council wants to, this is the town hall line item, council wants to increase this line item as possible for town hall construction. So I think if you wanted to put money in there, I think the budget note already reflects that, and that was discussed some.
So would we up that 10,000? We'd up it by 15, right? If we had to change.
Well, even if we held that amount that's proposed in here for now, we don't necessarily have to spend it all now. We're going to be doing another budget for
2021.
fiscal year, 2021. Anyway, we could always move it within a couple months if we find it's not necessary. I would expand on Dan's idea, maybe just do a real succinct test on it, but maybe,
Snapshot.
Yeah, figure out a way to get that snapshot and maybe have another, a phase 2 snapshot where you do a lot less. People have the idea that somebody's coming with a ticket, but they don't know when. I mean, we might find that it only costs like $5,000 a year going forward, just with the, the idea that you can get a ticket, but to get people's attention, that first
Right, if we can get a
study would kind of cover that,
Right,
hit
if we
it
can
hit
get
it
a
hard.
contract with somewhat randomized times of enforcement, that
Well,
would
I would
help with the deterrence
I think that
aspect.
would come later.
That's what we're
I
saying,
think
is that phase 2.
The beginning, yeah, I
Mhm.
think the beginning is, you need to see what's there. You may
Yeah.
as well be doing it, well, we only have it for 4 hours a week, a day, I don't know.
But say we spend $15,000 in phase 1 and we only get $1,000 in return, and we're spending $14,000 for somebody to walk around the town. We probably all would decide we don't want to continue that, but if we find that we get 15 and we get 10,000 or something like that, then we figure it could eventually break even and be worth some ongoing.
I think
Funding.
the phasing is a great idea, and then, whatever deterrent might come up later if there is a need or
Mhm.
whatever, we really don't even know. I mean, we may get somebody who would give us the guidance who says, well, it's less than 4 hours a day, you're not gonna get any bang for your buck or something. So we need to kind of be flexible and open, and I think that's all that this 31,000 was offering to us as a town, was just to be, if we need it. We haven't even engaged in any conversation with anybody yet. We'd have to list it.
Yeah.
Or something else, though, right?
I would second Phil's concern. I'm just not sure if it's a great spend of 31. Even if it nets out to 25 a year, I'm not sure it's a good
Yeah.
spend, so.
But the question here is, where would you want to move it? Jerry Lee was suggesting town hall planning. We have some interest about a townwide service for composting.
Why do we have to move it now versus the next budget? I thought we were just talking about
No,
that.
I'm fine, we don't have to.
Yeah.
I'm just
Then you're
laying
just-
on the table
yeah.
what Jerry
Yeah.
Lee was also.
Otherwise, it would go to contingency, I think would be the.
or it goes to
Contingency would work.
surplus.
Yeah, I'd rather put it in
Goes to carryover.
contingency than to leave it in parking.
I'd put it in contingency.
So we will put it in the operating,
Yeah.
we'll just move it into that. So how much of that do you want to move right now?
Half.
Sounds like half.
Half.
Right, we'll move, if you literally want half, we'll move 15,600 into contingency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew?
And I know I bring this up on a regular basis, but I still have to ask it anyway. Do you think we have enough money in the Yandell fund?
And the
That's a
which
good
one?
place, the Yendel, that's in
Oh,
the
yeah.
under
It's
reserves.
50,000, but I mean, I don't know what it's gonna,
I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
we
what
have somebody here who might have an idea what it takes to raise a house, but after that, what else happens?
Oh,
What's the
Where is that-
status on that?
where is that
It's
listed?
just-
oh, it's at the last, it's on the, I don't know where my sheet is, but it's on the last sheet, where you can also find it.
okay.
The last sheet of the budget, yeah, right there. And it's at 50 grand, but I just wonder if we shouldn't think about throwing a little more at it.
Refresh my memory, it's somebody that wants the
Could you
property to
see?
turn into a park?
Real quick, has anybody looked into second chance for that house?
To move?
Yandell property.
Yes.
Right.
The one
Nope.
that,
At the one
it's
on
been
Kenwood.
trusted to the town.
Been trusted to,
Park.
It needs to come down, it's gonna be a park.
right.
That was the intention.
Can you
I'm
get,
sorry.
Yeah,
sorry,
so-
can you come to the mic?
Well, I can say it for you. I think, Second Chance could take the whole thing down at no cost, essentially, right? And then they get everything, or they take it down, you pay them, and you get a tax credit on all of their work. Yeah, so Andrew, that's worth, I don't know what our structure allows us to do from a tax standpoint. But
Yeah.
as a private residence, it's a great business. You do need proper accounting to make sure that you get it through the IRS, but it's, we did it, and it's really win-win. Environment, jobs creation, tax savings, and, you know, and second chance, yeah, and so, you know, it's workforce development for the people that do the demo, then they sell the product, so it's good jobs creator, and it keeps stuff out of landfill, and you can essentially get 100% of your money back on the tax side.
Yeah, so they come in and they say, we'll take your house down, and we think it's worth, the sticks and bricks of your house are worth $200,000. They're gonna charge you $20,000 to take it down. And then at that point, they'll give you a receipt for $200,000 for the sticks and bricks, and they'll recycle all the materials they pull out of the house. And then you can use up your taxes.
I can tell,
They would pay us to,
I'm not sure it works with a public entity. We'd
Yeah, I
have to
don't,
look
that's the
into
only wild part I don't know.
that
we'll
part.
check into that. I mean,
Yeah.
once the owner, you know, passes, it's trusted to the town, it becomes the town property.
I mean, if they could do it for half price, it'd be a heck of a deal,
Yeah.
you know?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have to junk anything or much of it. I mean, that's a great deal to look at.
Yeah.
So does this answer your question, Phil?
So I guess,
Want more
assu-
or not?
I guess assuming that, then yeah, probably we're fine.
No. I don't know her condition.
And then,
but,
All right.
She may be,
So it sounds like it's not going to be on the radar for a bit.
we have time, I'm sure.
Think about it for 2021.
And then the other one I had was wind case.
Yes.
Is that, how do you end up with that particular number? Because I know that thing's like a real,
We have a note on this, actually, from FY '20.
do we get, are we being charged interest on that money? Is that,
So the only reason we have left this as a reserve is because, Andrew, where do we say?
we're adding to it, right?
Wait a minute.
21 point.
If you look at the notes on page 4, as I am, let's see. Yeah, we have interest, and this was all analyzed back in, I don't know, April or May when we first worked on the FY20. We had a rough estimate of what we could be owing. The question of owing, though, is whether we'll just be reducing, the county will reduce what we get, or, and which I think is really all it's going to be, rather than just actually paying back, you know, physically. So even if they reduced us by this amount, and this has been highly analyzed a lot last April, and accruing as we go each year, that we don't hear anything or have to pay back, in other words, lose some money, lose some revenue. So it's really a fallback in case we get such a bad cut that we have extra in our reserve to offset that. That's all it's really for right now. It's not like we're gonna write a check. You know, from year to year, and I can't remember how many years they expect this to be paid out, and everything seems to be a moving target.
Yeah.
And it, as we heard at
5
the
years,
public forum,
20 quarters.
right, 5 years, that the payback may occur, even though it's not literally a payback, it's more of a reduction. But as we heard from District 18 on January 6th, perhaps the state's gonna really help a little bit. As Hans said, maybe we'll see a check to the county. So even our cost of this may go down. It's in the reserve just in case we were going to get really hit.
Okay.
That's why it's there. And it was put there, you know, long before I was here, as mayor,
Oh, yeah.
so.
No, I just wanted to make
Because
sure.
back then, we never even knew how this was gonna go. We didn't know if we had to write a check or what, but I'm assured that it's gonna be a reduction in
And
the income line. Because that's what the wind case refers to. Residents who pay taxes on business commerce, interstate commerce code. So across the state border, as well as they're also taxed in-state, so,
Okay, so you guys feel there's enough there that,
yeah.
based on that calculation, is enough to cover the, because it really is a revenue shortfall is what it's gonna amount to for the time that they're gonna pay back the wind case, however,
Over a 5-year
They
period.
do it
is
over
what
5
the
years.
assessment was supposed to be.
Okay.
Once it gets started, it would take 5 years.
Right.
So, you know, in an abstract way, Phil, we could actually, once this starts, once, you know, the county begins this reduction or payback to those residents who paid more than they were supposed to, we could ostensibly start reducing the wind case
Right.
reserve.
right, no, that makes sense.
Version. Okay, so with the adjustment of the line what line was that? With the adjustment to, was that 11.2.3? Yes.
Yes.
A reduction of 15,600 to that line, and adding that to the 17.0 contingency, so you have a net zero balanced budget. Other than that, I think we got it. And the textual change to capital planning line 32.2 to refer to the community center rather than just Garrett Park Nursery School. I think those are the only changes, and if that's the
That-
only changes,
Pardon, that change would also apply to 13.4.
yes,
Please.
actually, I did put that up there too.
Okay.
It applies to 28.2 and 32.2.
13.4.
Where's 13 on the operations side? Where are you looking?
There's a reference to the curbing at the nursery school, which is actually, you know, the community center
So
property.
that is-
13.4.
Oh, it's on the other page.
Yeah, the number's on the other
Got
page.
it.
Page 4,
That
top.
changed too, yep, top of page 4. Okay. With those changes, would anybody like to make a motion? Oh, it's on the, it's
Oh,
on the table.
I don't think you need another
So,
motion.
We'll need
Yeah, it's on the table.
No further discussion.
No further discussion?
no further discussion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any nays or, all right. Okay, this is passed with those changes. Thank you. All right, moving on, and hope we can go quickly. We do have, Andrea, do you want to take the new business section for the budget work session? You wanna bring
Sure.
that up?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the FY '21 budget schedule, and if we have, if it's introduced in, we could either introduce it in March and then adopt it in April, or introduce it in April, adopt it in May, but wanted to get everybody's availability for having a work session in between now and then, and if I can send out a meeting poll invite, but wanted to understand if there's dates to avoid.
We could avoid the spring break for the school system, that would be
Okay.
helpful. and I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I might be able to find it.
Is this a plan for a weekend or a
April
weekday?
4th through April 11th,
You already
that's
know.
spring break. It's the only thing I care about is vacations and composting.
Sometimes straws.
Yeah, and straws
What about parking?
and parking.
Okay, so April 4th to the 11th is the public
That's spring
school
break,
spring
yeah.
break.
Yeah.
School break. Okay. So I think the general idea Andrea's putting on the table here is, do you want to introduce the budget in April and approve it in May, or do you want to introduce it in March and approve it in April? So this is where this will help Andrea schedule when the budget retreat should happen.
Well, Andrea, what, I would generally say later is better, because then you're closer to the actual period, if there's new information. But do you have a recommendation of the pros or cons of the timing?
You'll have an election in between. The introduction and the adoption is one consideration. Another consideration, another thing to keep in mind is even if it adopts in May, if something comes up, there's still an extra month with June. It's cutting it pretty close, but you still have an extra kind of 1 month of wiggle room in there before you're really up against the wire.
For July 1st start.
Yeah, for July 1st start. So those would be just a couple considerations.
So from an expediency standpoint, are you saying sort of get it introduced and approved before the election, and then you still have time for revisions when you get closer to the actual?
Yeah,
And also-
it'd be your,
It also means that if there's a new council in May, they won't be voting on something that they haven't voted on.
Right,
Yeah, that would be difficult to vote on a budget your first meeting.
right.
In fairness, to the next council, I think what we should do is aim to have it approved in April.
Great.
Yeah, probably
I would
good-
agree.
yeah.
I would agree, definitely.
There you
Good
go.
for consistency. Any mayor that comes in, they would
Yeah.
do 2 of them in their term, not 1 or 3.
so given that then, so we would be looking at sometime between now and, sorry, computer's slow, between now and March 9th.
So if you're
There.
introducing in March, we probably have to have the work session,
Yeah, a couple weeks, yeah.
Before March.
then, sure, yep. Agreed.
probably February maybe.
And yeah, knowing schedule is probably looking at February at this point, so if there's any dates to avoid in February.
President's Day weekend, please, avoid.
And if you all have any that you come up with later, just email them to me and I can avoid those before I send out the poll. But I'll shoot for sometime in February.
And what's the general thought, like midweek, midday, midweek evenings, weekend, like is there so we can give you a target so you don't have to like poll the entire month? Anybody have preferences
I'd
or?
rather do a weeknight than a weekend,
My preference is a weekend,
yeah.
although it may be hard to do.
So yours is weekday night, yours is weekend, that's not helping. Sorry, he said, that's now 7 days a week for Andrea.
How many hours do you usually devote to this?
I think did we do what, two hours maybe last time? Does that seem right? Yeah.
I think weekend would be okay if we did it like really early, so it doesn't kill the day, like literally 8 to 10 in the morning or something on Saturday.
I'm not even up.
Nope.
Doesn't give
I'm
me
going
o'clock
for a
meetings,
run at
so-
10 in the morning, so that's the
We'd
earliest.
be done
maybe.
by then if we started at 8.
I won't even be thinking straight, let me tell you.
To that end, it would be good to get kind of thoughts out ahead via email and then, be able to kind of hit the ground running so we could do it quicker. I think last year there was a lot of things that took a lot of discussion because it was a little bit of a surprise on some of it. So if we could try to knock out some stuff in advance, would be good.
Yeah, the biggest thing is the property tax assessments and, the tax rate. don't know. Got to do the analysis to know whether we need to change anything. The analysis is kind of involved.
So Andrea, I guess just send out a poll with a smattering and then see what gets you a majority,
Yeah, okay.
right? We
Yep.
just,
Yeah, I think
we
that's-
may not get everybody and then, we'll cross that bridge.
Here's an idea. Is there any possibility of doing it in tandem with the February meeting? This meeting, like maybe we do an hour meeting and make sure we keep it short, 45 minutes to an hour, and then do it right after or right before? Maybe we start at 6:30 and the one time, kind of double it up. Somebody's groaning over here.
I'm like, I'm just thinking, I can just,
Still working at that hour.
no, I mean, I could figure out how to get out of that, but that's not, no, the big, I'm just thinking that we wouldn't have enough time.
It might take 7 to 9:30.
Focused on the budget.
I would think we just, stay focused on the budget and.
Doodle poll.
Beautiful.
And I think last year we didn't have everybody, or we didn't have everybody the whole time, right?
I had to leave for a flight or something, but
Yep.
maybe I'll plan to do that again.
There you go.
Okay. Shall we go on to the next new business item, which is whether, a discussion about having a digital-only copy for the town council meeting documents, or to continue with hard copy documents in packets that are delivered in advance.
I can start, like, where it came from is tonight I was running around trying to get my packet. I couldn't remember where I put it in the house. And I realized that half the time I don't even open it because I just look at the digital one, and another half the time things change between when the packet goes out and when we get here anyway. I'm wondering if for me, if I would even need it. And it's one of my New Year's resolutions is to be more digital and less paper. I'm not an environmental activist by any stretch, but I just feel like it's too much for me, like too much paper around. So I'm thinking
good
I
with
could do it.
digital. I like
Yeah.
having a printed copy, but if you're gonna have printed copies here anyways. which
Yeah,
is
for here,
final,
yeah.
Emailing the digital,
Yeah.
I find that a hard copy really useful because I can put notes on it.
And I second that, because that's what I do.
And
Yeah,
I just,
I think it's good for
just
here.
For those who care, I think there's a misleading notion that paper, not using paper is environmentally friendly, and I would argue against that supposition.
Mhm.
Because this, when you store it, doesn't cost you any kilowatt hours. If you store anything electronically, it sits there forever on absorbing kilowatt
Yeah.
hours.
I've also heard that in the age of
Masses.
computers, people use way more paper because they print out all kinds of things they never look at.
well, what if
You-
you
you
just
could
send
make
it
it
out
optional.
digitally, and those who want it printed at home?
Yeah, just leave it.
Or you make it optional, the delivery.
I think from our standpoint, it's not an issue. If we know who wants the packets, we
Yeah.
can deliver to the folks that want the packets, and
Yeah.
the folks that don't, we don't.
Perfect, do
we
it that
don't
way.
need to
That's
do
the
Yeah.
best, yeah.
Done.
That's fine.
Onward.
I felt guilty
Yeah.
that
Who
2 or 3
wants-
times
Who
Andrea
wants-
dropped it off.
Who wants packets?
I want paper.
I'm fine digital.
Digital.
Okay, so Dawn.
I'll go over to Hans's if I want to read the printed one.
You go. I'm going to have coffee while I read this newspaper.
Okay, let's go to town updates if we can. Is that all right?
Yep.
SRTS project. Some good news. The subcontractor submittal forms have almost all been completed
Is
and
this for the inspection, or?
sent into SHA. This is the subcontractor forms that we referred to in the minutes. What percentage of their company, of the cost is part of a disadvantaged or minority
Oh, yes.
business entity, that kind of thing, and it's all getting tracked. So anyway, with that said, we have, I hate to even say this, likelihood that we will start stakeout next Tuesday along Oxford. which means we should see paper letters distributed by the construction company, Patriot, to residents along Oxford sometime this week, and the town will follow with an announcement to all residents, so everybody's aware. I've been hesitant to say it because, I've said it before after somebody said that to me, and it didn't happen, but I got a better feeling this time that our probability is a bit higher, and it might happen. I just want to have that little caveat out there that for the Bugle, that we're hoping to see this on Tuesday.
If the Bugle beats the
There is
stakes.
no guarantee, but that's what I've been told today. So let's keep thinking that way. That's what we're told. Should be able to happen. Okay, and that's all I have.
Nice.
Great.
Let's go on then. Stephen, did you want to talk any length here about the land use or keep it brief?
A short length.
Okay.
Keep it kind of brief. So we talked about this a little bit at these two topics in December, and I don't have it finalized, but I've done a lot of work since then trying to study both of these issues. I keep the corner lots especially brief. In essence, Garrett Park has 3 levels of zoning. We have the R90 base zoning, then we have a Garrett Park overlay on top of that, and then we have the town ordinance on top of that. At one point, we weren't really able to do the kind of things we do in the ordinance now. We weren't able to do them back then. So some things kind of revert back to when we had that overlay. But there's 2 different things talked about corners in the Garrett Park overlay, which is sort of that middle level. There's text that says, in the case of a corner lot, if the adjoining lot on one of the streets either does not front on that street or is in a non-residential zone, which could be like a park, there's a handful of those around town, then the setback from that street must be at least 15 feet. When you get to the ordinance, at some point it was put in, or not quite sure, the Land Use Advisory Committee, we talked about this, we weren't quite sure why there was so much effort to put in this on the ordinance when it already says it in the overlay, but in the ordinance, it just doesn't say the 30 and the 15, it just says, no main building or new construction shall be nearer to any street right away than 30 feet. But what we're noticing, and this has been discussed apparently much longer than I thought it had been, and apparently this goes back years, the town was originally designed with a lot of relatively narrow and deep lots, and later on, development was more squarish lots. So a lot of the zoning that exists around now is really geared towards those more squarish, mid-century and later lots, not really towards what you might get in Garrett Park, where you might have a lot that's 50 foot wide and 200 feet deep. And when you do get that, we have a lot of them in the middle of the blocks, like myself. But if you get that on a corner lot, you have a 10-foot setback on one side, and you have a 30-foot setback on the other side, which leaves you can basically put a mobile home and attach it to the ground in the middle of the 10-foot that you have left. So that's the thing we're feeling. It's not really totally in the spirit of the town, because the town would have been, it was designed kind of picturing those longer, narrow houses, which are pretty common. It wasn't picturing the ranch houses that are wider and shorter that you got later. So what we are proposing, that Land Use Advisory Committee, and everybody was unanimous on this, is that consider taking out that line that's in the ordinance so that everything is controlled back to what the overlay already says. So I put more information in here, kind of explaining all that more in depth. So I want to have it kind of fact-checked by everybody involved, make sure I didn't make any mistakes. I gave some other examples of what Kensington has, what Garrett Park Estates has, so people get a better idea of like what R90 is versus other similar zoning. But I want to be able to put that up on the website and then propose this change to the ordinance at the February meeting. So put out either a notice or a Bugle article that will link to this study. So that's where we are on the corner lot setbacks. Dedues, I studied those. Well, that's a detached accessory dwelling unit. I studied a little bit further, and as we were saying the last time, county put together ZTA, like a zoning text amendment, year 19-01. They passed it, I think, in June of last year, but it went through and got approved. I think it went into effect December 31st of last year, so now it's kind of on the books that you can do it. And in a nutshell, we talked about some diagrams of either November or December of last year. If you have just the right formula, just by following what the county rule is, you could basically put a Chevy house in the back of a medium-sized property in Garrett Park, which was a little bit surprising, I think, especially to Sean Conlon when he was here, because he thought he lived in an accessory dwelling. So we showed that example, but I've been digging a little bit deeper on it. Just the way the Land Use Advisory Committee is kind of looking at this is kind of treat that accessory dwelling that would be a dwelling, just treat it like any other accessory building, because we already have language in our code about it, and so does the county, so it would be treated basically the same as what a garage or a shed might be. But still want to look at the placement of that, and as I dug deeper, I found our Garrett Park overlay already has some language, but it seems like it's a little bit outdated. I think it predates, the way it's written, I think it predates what we have in our ordinance. We need to look into that a little bit further to see if maybe we need to possibly add something in the ordinance specific to accessory dwelling units, or modify that Garrett Park overlay with the county, or both. But mostly it seems like we'll be able to accommodate this within the basic guardrails we have for accessory dwelling units. So we probably won't get a lot of cases where you really could put that Chevy house size thing in the back of like a 15,000 square foot. Maybe it could work if you have like a triple lot, like a 30,000 square foot, but we're going to look into it a little bit further. So that's sort of where we are on those two topics.
Do the county provisions for this address potential parking issues at all? If you're going to double the population on a lot, you might end up with more cars than because not every property here has a driveway.
I got to go back and check and see where it went in the final. In their drafts, they were going back and forth on whether or not they were going to require you had off-street parking. I think in the end, they were pushing to not have it. So some towns like Chevy Chase, I think especially, were pushing to have that off-street. They didn't want the streets taken up with cars and trucks. But I had to go back and check and see where it landed on that.
Yeah, I think it would be good to address that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I
Yeah.
also have a question, Stephen. We've talked in the past about the prohibiting of the Airbnb. How would this play into any kind of like short-term rental? Not Airbnb per se, but, do we have to have any kind of language? And I don't necessarily mean that it has to be with land use, but the land use committee, but it's something, if this becomes an interest to residents, is there any other way that we have to treat this?
I'm not sure. I'll be on the lookout. I'm curious about that as well. I'll be on the lookout for it as I dig further into this. I've mostly been looking at the land use regulations that are around for accessory dwellings, not looking back on what they did in the actual ZTA. I could kind of see in my travels through it and see where they are on it. One of the other issues that came up with it before was some jurisdictions were pointing out that it was odd to them that you couldn't build a guest house, but now all of a sudden you could build a rental house, but nobody was going to regulate who you're renting it to or for how much or anything like that, so who really knows? So it seems like they kind of, unless they found a patch for that, they probably broke one of their own rules with a new one.
How can we actually prevent these can we prevent them with what we currently have? In other words, the county apparently allows you to have these detached accessory dwelling units. And so we could and we're going to treat them like an accessory building, from what you're saying. And can we do that, or are they a whole new class of building? Because we kind of ran into trouble years ago with trying to regulate something coming at it from the side. And so my concern is, is there some way that we legitimately can call these and treat them as accessory buildings, the same as a garage?
Yeah, that's our assumption, but that's a good question. So maybe I'll just try to talk to the county, see how they're looking at it overall. Like if
Yeah.
they're doing the same thing we're supposing could be done to treat a garage and a dwelling unit the same, but they might be right, they might be adding something else.
Right, it's a concern that they're gonna, it's a whole new class of building, if you will, and
Yeah.
as such, we can't treat it the same as something else we might have had in the past, like a garage or a shed or a whatever.
And it could very well be, because one of their stated goals with this was to ward off kind of this being illegally done, especially the ones that are in a house, where the people just do it.
Yeah.
Especially, east of here. But to have more code official and building permit oversight of those things, I would think they definitely have more interest in look at a dwelling unit than they would at a garage, so.
Right.
It may very well be that they're going there too. Any other questions?
Not a question, a comment. Of the issues that we face as a council, the most controversial are always zoning. And I would strongly urge that whatever you propose to do, that we have specifically called for public meetings to discuss very specifically what's proposed and what we're trying to achieve.
That's the
And get a
purpose of
sense of the community, because people have very strong feelings about this place, not just their property, but about this place. And the sense of open space and all of those things, and needing to preserve what we have. And they're just strong feelings, and I would not want to have the council make this decision without strong community involvement.
I'm not so sure I would agree, but I think it's a relatively simple thing, and it's going to be written out pretty in-depth in a study, so the plan is to put it out at the next meeting. If there are people that have a concern, we could talk about it at that point. If it seems like it's surprisingly too much, then we could do a meeting, but I feel like it's overkill to schedule a separate meeting. It's 10 lots within the whole town, and it's not making any kind of anything close to a wholesale change, so I think there may be the impression that it changes the, like the character of the town, but it wouldn't be rational that it really does that. Like, I see where you're going at, but I feel like it's a emotional subject more than a, thought-through subject.
The last time we undertook this, it was a matter of 3 years.
But that was to tackle the really big issues. This is
I
like
understand.
This is the corner lots, you said there's only
Yeah.
10.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
yeah, we're not talking about, I mean,
I'm just,
I hear you, but if say we were talking about, and it came up in the accessory dwelling units, we were talking about that it's not worth, there was so much blood, sweat, and tears on coming up with that 20% lot coverage that we have in the town. Like, if say we proposed that, maybe that could be 27 or whatever number, that would be the thing I think would be a monumental change in public meetings, but I feel like this is a accessory thing on the edge of it, so. And it's something that apparently was talked about by people that were studying these issues way back when that stuff was all settled. So. I hear you, but I don't agree to make a big show of it, so.
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking,
I've just, having lived through that time, strong
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah.
yep,
There's never
But
a
it's
downside
hard.
to more communication, for sure.
right.
Well, that's the whole point of writing all this out and being able to put it on the website so people could read it in depth and not show up at a public meeting with more emotion than thought of what is really happening. I just don't feel like it's that productive.
Okay, for the sake of time, I'd like to move on, but Stephen, is it possible that, we leave it out on the website for like a month so that we're not necessarily bringing it up next council meeting? Or do you feel like we have to do that sooner? Because I think just having it up there so people can kind of see it and read it,
I think that's
see what we actually.
fine, even to like push back proposing something just to see if there's any feedback. The only reason I was saying February is I feel like I was talking about January now, I'm talking about February, and it'd be like the sidewalks that, we're not guaranteeing. So I don't want to delay it unnecessarily. I don't think it's an emergency issue, but I feel like it's just trying to keep the ball moving on something we
Just trying to.
worked hard to kind of make sure we got together and all discussed. So,
Just trying to look for a compromise.
but
Well,
but if people think that would be a great help, we could look at it that way instead. Just put the information out now in January, have January and February, and then introduce it in March instead if there's not really a big,
and if they have questions, they could refer to you.
if sure.
That would be on a note or notice.
Oh, and even the Land Use Advisory Committee as well, so happy to interpret it, so.
Worthwhile compromise for now? Yeah?
Good.
Okay. All right, Hans, would you like to update us on this?
Just very quickly. This has to do with the traffic light and putting its flashing light on the hill when somebody has activated the crossing at Keswick, which we've been trying to do with SHA. SHA finally came to the conclusion that wasn't justified in their minds, even though the surveys indicated that it was necessary. And so I've been dealing with our delegation, the 18th district, and when they were here for the walk, for the sidewalk, look-see, and then again when the 18th delegation had their town hall meeting here Monday a week ago, was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago? Monday a week ago. I talked to each of the delegates and our senator, and they very much agree that and support what we're trying to do. And so the question that they have to come back to us with is, what's the next step? And I think this consensus seems to be that the most logical thing as a first step that they would take would just to jointly sign a letter that would go to SHA and possibly copy the governor to see if we can't get this done. And again, the idea would be there would be a flashing light on the hill to alert people when somebody has activated the crossing flashing light. That doesn't address the question of do they ignore the flashing light, but at least it gives us it gives everybody a head's notice before they can see the crossing and whether or not their cars are stopped or whether or not there's somebody in the intersection, that there is somebody in the intersection as they come in up the hill. It would say caution, something to the effect, caution pedestrian in crosswalk. And it would flash only as it triggered by so it wouldn't be something that people would get used to and be more effective therefore. So that's where we stand.
Hans, may I ask a question? Sure. Referring to Jennifer's suggestion of a camera, do you think that could be included as just we would also like the state or the county to entertain a camera?
It would probably, this gets to the messy ground because technically Strathmore Avenue is a state highway and is managed by the State Highway Administration as opposed to by the county. And I don't know who the people would be we'd have to deal with. I suspect it would have to be the state. On the other hand, some functions of managing traffic on state highway is delegated to Montgomery County. So we'd have to talk to them and find out. I'm not quite sure what the camera would accomplish, but Oh, I see you. A speed camera, yeah. It may be possible. I don't know. Again, one of the problems that we've always had with SHA is their role and their task is to keep traffic moving. And they don't want to hear anybody coming up with ideas that might slow them down. So it's one of these things we have to. It's certainly worthwhile asking the question and saying, and then the second question becomes, where does the revenue go? I don't think we would care, right? Yeah. Anyway, I just want to let you know we've been working on this for a year and a half, trying to work through the system at SHA that has failed us, and so now I'm going to the delegation.
Well, the time is right now because both state and county are really concerned about pedestrian safety.
As they should be.
This might
As
be
they
the
should
time
be.
to.
Hans, does it help if someone like Jennifer gets, 50 town residents to also sign a letter? I mean, does that, when you have a resident who's willing to.
During an election year, that always works.
Well, it might also be helpful to know a few intersections where the cameras are currently installed. So maybe some follow-up with those jurisdictions could be checked.
Do we have those as much like DC has a camera everywhere and 300 towers everywhere. I don't know. Does Maryland have that as much other than speed?
I think the District of Columbia sees a revenue stream.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they make
I'm not-
many, many millions.
Yes, they do.
It's a big part of their plan, but my point is, I don't think Maryland has that greed that DC does on it. So I don't know if we have as many cameras.
Well, we had traffic cameras on Connecticut Avenue.
For speed, yeah, but do we have any for these flashing lights?
Well,
But even a speed camera, I mean, they change behavior. Like when I commute
yeah.
downtown on Connecticut Avenue, and
Yeah.
if you're new in town, you're like, why is everybody going so slow? You get your first ticket, and then you join the slow team. So,
they're effective, no question. Anyway, so that's where we stand, and I appreciate you bringing it up, but I'll be in discussion with the delegation, and then I'll ask the question, can we look into the possibility of a flashing light that is basically a photographic way of controlling speed?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Some people come up, I know they're going over 50 when they come up that hill, sometimes 60, so.
Okay.
but Jennifer, I would think if you did a letter, even just signed by a bunch of neighbors, 20 signatures with addresses, and you get that to Hans, and it's one more thing he shows the state senator, they do pay attention, yeah.
Time is right.
Right.
Oh, anybody,
Anyone who walks to the pool uses that crosswalk.
Yeah.
Or many people.
Yeah, I think it could be any resident in town, but, a real letter or a petition thing with signatures, I think at the state level, that delegation, that, they see 20 or 30 signatures of real folks.
I'll respond. Yeah.
Okay, well, just for sake of time, we're going to move on, and it's a nice segue into traffic and parking. Phil?
So, although it may be a little bit ahead of time, I did go look through came up with some possible ideas on traffic violation notices that I'll pass out for consideration. These are all basically commercially done, although we could certainly copy out anything we wanted to and change it. And yes, the last one was for fun. So I'll give you some, it was on 2 pages there. I think I got enough. Should. Here, I'll give you a couple more just in case. 2 pages?
And are these
It's only one.
like hard to scrape off stickers that
Yes.
you put on people's windshields?
Yes, and that was part of my idea behind this. I've got a couple extras if somebody wants one. But the idea would be, these things can be used both as something you could slide under the windshield, or they're the nasty ones where you peel off the back and the adhesive allows you to stick them on. And I've kind of rated them everywhere from, I'll say, nice to a little more aggressive. But I had to put the last one in there just for the fun of it.
Well, there's a couple that are funny.
So,
Not 5 minutes, not 30 seconds, not...
not at all. They're all commercially available, which is nice, which would make it easier to work with. And for the first notice, for example, you could just put it under somebody's windshield wiper. The second notice, you could stick it on the side of their window where it would take some effort to get it off, and then the third time, you give them the ticket, if we wanted to do a phased-in approach.
Thank you, Phil. I like these. I have some comments, but maybe we could just all email you
That would be
what
great.
our thoughts are, so we
Yep.
can go onto the archives. But I appreciate you doing this, and some parts are usable here, so
Yeah, and I
we'll
mean,
get back to you on our
and we could mix and match, or we could use whatever. We could do it as 2 of them, whatever everybody wants.
One thing that I think is missing is that we need to say something about the town of Garrett Park.
Sure.
Issuing this warning or notice.
Yeah,
It needs a porcupine.
that works.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Can you
So jumping on the archives, we recently received two new donations, the Senator Frank Shore Waverly Schuylkill Park Collection and the Thomas S. Wilson Baseball Collection. I'll be honest with you, I'm not familiar with either one. However, Claire is working hard to process both those, get them organized, cataloged and set up with finding aids so one can find them and find out what's in there. In addition to that, for June through December, they've responded to 30 research requests to assist, with the most popular subject being houses and property. And as you know, they put up a new display, which will be up until mid-March, Let It Snow in Garrett Park.
Okay.
We can only hope
The
for
new display is called Let It Snow.
Let It Snow, Garrett Park.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Bill. Andrea, do you want to give us a quick update on your report?
Yeah, I will not reread it, but we had, for monthly financials, the December revenues, operations and capital budget are all at expected levels. We had one permit. It was issued for a concrete replacement of an asphalt driveway at 11309 Kenilworth. And in terms of town office and maintenance highlights, there were a lot of administrative items this past month. Reports that were submitted included the audit related to trees, roads, and solid waste. And just a heads up to residents that there's a lot of tree work that's planned, so pretty substantial list for pruning, and will also be one for removals. And just wanted to formally thank our contract arborist, Phil Normandy, for all of his support in getting those lists together. It's a big undertaking, so that's all for me.
And as people probably saw, I know I told you guys earlier, but Pepco got out and got to our trees along Strathmore too, so
Yeah.
we now have freshly cut V's into some of our trees, unfortunately, for
Yeah.
reasons they don't quite understand, given that the trees are nowhere near any power line of substance, so.
Phil met with the Pepco arborists ahead of time, and they agreed to do the minimal amount of cutting, but obviously that's not what happened. But there's more Pepco work that will be done on Kenilworth, and so Phil's going to meet with the arborist again to talk about what happened, so
Great.
he's got an email into him.
Thank you, Andrea. If there are no other questions, comments by the council? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.